This video covers everything you need to know about strength training after breast cancer. How often should you be lifting? How heavy should the weights be? How many repetitions and which exercises to include? Hi, I'm Erica. I'm a breast cancer thriver and a chiropractor. How do you know which exercises to do? You want to focus on something called compound movements rather than isolation movements. These are movements that use many different muscle groups and mimic everyday type of movements. So a shoulder press would mimic lifting your luggage into the overhead compartment on a plane. A deadlift would mimic picking something up off the floor. Isolation movements, on the other hand, target specific muscles. These aren't bad. I still do some of these as a part of my rehab, but if you're going to be selective about how many exercises you're going to be doing, you want to make sure you're choosing the ones that will give you the most bang for your buck. Strength training keeps our bones strong and reduces the risk of osteoporosis. It increases muscle mass and strength and reduces the muscle wasting that can happen during chemo. It eases overall pain and stiffness, which may be more pronounced during menopause or if you're on hormonal therapy. It increases energy levels and targets cancer-related fatigue. It contributes to maintaining a healthy body weight. A bonus is the body composition changes that happen when you're doing weights, and you're not going to see the same thing if you're doing cardio alone. Did I mention that exercise, including strength training, can reduce the risk of a breast cancer recurrence? Take away all those other benefits and it would be worth doing strength training alone just for this benefit. For those of you concerned about lymphedema and lifting weights, the research shows that there's no increased risk or worsening of swelling. To the contrary, it can actually reduce lymphedema symptoms and the frequency of flare-ups. This is what you'll need in terms of equipment. Dumbbells. Having a few different weight options will be helpful, or you could invest in one of those adjustable weight sets if you're doing this at home. If you have kettlebells, this will also work. A resistance band, an elevated surface, so a bench at the gym or a chair if you're at home, and a yoga mat or a rug if you're at home. How heavy should your weight be? Heavier than you think. Your capacity to lift will be somewhat determined by your pre-surgery lifting experience. You'll have a better idea of how much to lift once you know how many reps you want to aim for. The aim is about 8 to 12 repetitions per set. You want to leave a few reps in reserve. This means that you're not going to absolute failure on that last rep, but it should be pretty challenging. If you're doing 10 to 12 reps and could probably continue on and do 15 to 20 reps, then your weight is too light. We can have a tendency to keep our weight at the same amount week after week, so be sure to be continually challenging yourself and increasing that weight over time. Having said that, even though the goal is to lift heavy, you really want to start slow and then gradually increase over time. Be mindful of keeping proper form. You never want to sacrifice your form for increasing extra weight. How often should you be doing strength training post-cancer? The current research recommendation is doing 2 to 3 sessions per week, focusing on the major muscle groups. You can definitely do more than this, but this is the minimum. I typically do about 5 CrossFit workouts a week, which combines both strength training and cardio. For the first few months after my double mastectomy and then reconstruction surgery, I did about 4 workouts a week, and this allowed me a little bit more time to do rehab. A few tips before you get started. General strength training can begin once you're past the 6-week mark post-surgery, and check with your healthcare team on the specifics in your case. Be sure to nail your shoulder mobility first before lifting too much weight, especially movements overhead. If you don't have adequate range of motion, your body's going to compensate, which will predispose you to injury. Be careful not to compete with your pre-cancer self. I have struggled with this since both of my surgeries, and I could do a whole video on adapting to this new normal situation. I had so many tears returning to the gym, and this wasn't just post-surgery. I still have my moments even a number of years out from surgery. My capacity is different. I don't lift as heavy, my stamina is less, and cording and radiation fibrosis affected my shoulder and arm motion. I still modify a bunch of movements, and I can't compete like I used to be able to. Hearing all that sounds like I can't do anything, which isn't true, but it's just the comparison that I'm making to my pre-surgery capacity, and it was a high bar that was set by me. The limitations aren't with all movements. I've been able to get back to lifting quite heavy for a bunch of different exercises. But I know that there's some movements that I probably won't ever do again, given that my implants are under the muscle. So mentally, this is still a work in progress for me. Okay, let's get into the exercises. I'm going to show a few different progressions for each exercise for both upper and lower body. What option you choose will depend on the equipment that you have and your experience with lifting. I plan on doing a number of follow-along strength training videos, so watch out for those in the future. For upper body, there's pushing, pressing, and pulling movements. For pushing, you can either do body weight movements or weights. Let's start with the easiest body weight movement, incline push-ups. While keeping a rigid body, bend your arms to lower down and then straighten them to raise your body back up. The height of the surface determines the difficulty. You can start out with a higher surface and work towards doing the full range of motion so that your chest eventually touches the surface. As you get stronger, you can lower the height of the surface until you're able to do push-ups right on the ground. If you have implants under the muscle like I do, you may or may not be limiting chest exercises. I use my chest muscles all day at work, and so I've actually been quite conservative in doing chest exercises at the gym. For a chest press, you can do this on a gym bench, or if you're at home, you can do a floor press. You won't be going through as much range of motion on the floor, but this still builds strength. Another variation is an incline chest press, which targets more of the upper pec fibers and front of the shoulder. I tend to do this more often compared to a flat bench, as there's less movement on my implants at this angle. When I'm doing a flat bench press, I often do this with heavier weights only on my radiated side. This implant doesn't move as much when I activate my chest muscles, and this side is also much weaker compared to the other side, so I'm not actually creating an imbalance by only doing the one side. The next movement is upper body pressing. The body weight movement for this is done in a pike position on your hands and feet. You would lower your head down to lightly touch the ground and then push away, straightening your arms. If this variation is too challenging to start with, you could go from your knees rather than your feet. Using weight, you would do a shoulder press. There are a few different arm variations to choose from. You can keep your palms facing forward the whole time. Alternatively, you can keep your palms facing inwards, which can be a bit easier if you have any shoulder issues. You could also do a combination where you're starting off with your palms facing you, and then the dumbbells rotate as you put them overhead. Then reverse this on the way back down. If you don't have that full range of motion overhead, you'd want to modify by doing partial motion reps. So going up half to 3/4 of the way and then also reducing the weight. Before my surgeries, I used to do this movement a lot more with a barbell. Radiation fibrosis affected my shoulder motion, and you require a greater motion using a barbell as compared to dumbbells. If I'm doing a weightlifting class where we'll be doing 1 or 2 reps at a time, I'm fine with using a barbell even if it's heavy. Upper body pulling can be done from 2 angles. The first is pulling from horizontal, and the second is pulling from overhead. For horizontal pulling, the easiest variation to start with is using resistance band. Ensure that you're pulling with the muscles in between your shoulder blades and not relying solely on your arms to pull the band back. The next progression is using dumbbells. A bench over row can be done with both arms at the same time or one arm at a time. Ensure that your back is straight during this exercise and not rounded so you can hinge at the hips when you're getting into position. If you do have low back pain doing this variation, you could adjust your form first. If you still have pain, this next variation may suit you better. This is actually a good variation even if you don't have back pain though. Place your hand and knee on a bench and do the row movement with the other arm. If you're doing this movement at home, doing a tripod version of a bench over row may be easier, where you're only placing your hand on an elevated surface and not your knee. This is usually how I like to do it, even if I'm at the gym. Another variation that I did after surgery is using a TRX. I do something similar at the gym using the rings. In the beginning, I did this with much less of a lean, and as I got stronger, I moved my feet further out in front to make this more challenging. Pulling movements from overhead are the hardest positions to mimic if you're doing your workouts at home. You can start by doing a lat pull apart with a resistance band. While using your lat muscles, which run along the side and the back of your torso, pull the band from overhead to out to the side. You ideally want to use a heavier resistance for this movement as you're trying to mimic lifting weights. If you're doing your workouts at home, you could use the TRX again. Compared to the row, you would move the handles up and then start in more of a squat position, then mimic a pull-up movement, bending and straightening your arms. If you're at the gym, you could do the lat pull-down cable machine. The next progression is doing some sort of variation of a pull-up on an actual bar. If you have a much thicker band like this one, you can put your foot or knee in the band and this will assist you up. You could start out with a partial range of motion and then work your way up to pulling yourself up higher. Another option, which I prefer, is doing feet-assisted pull-ups. Using a Smith machine or place a bar on a squat rack at about chest level and then do pull-ups as usual, but your legs are assisting you. As you get stronger, you would offload some of the weight from your feet and then carry it more in your arms. I used to be able to bang out a bunch of pull-ups in a row before surgery, and I was able to get back to doing one at a time after my double mastectomy. Once radiation fibrosis set in, pull-ups have been much slower to progress, and it's been quite humbling. My shoulder gets aggravated when I activate my lat muscle, which are the prime muscles for pulling yourself up. I'm much weaker on the side that I had radiation, and those muscles just don't activate as well as the other side. And so they spasm also after workouts when they're fatigued. Annoying. About 80% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed. Consider it, as it really helps to spread the videos to more women going through treatment. For lower body, there's squatting, hinging, and one-leg movements. You can start with body weight squats. You'll see a lot of variation in form with exactly how to do this. I typically do these with my feet a little bit turned out, and then my knees are in line with my toes as I'm squatting down. Contrary to popular belief, there's no perfect squat position, so do what works best for you. If you have any knee pain or find these squats challenging, you can do them to a target. Use a bench if you're at the gym or a chair if you're at home. You can either fully sit down and then stand up, or just tap your butt on the chair and then stand up. If you can do body weight squats pain-free, then you're ready to add weight. A goblet squat holding the weight in front is the easiest variation to maintain form. Try to keep the weight as close to your body as possible, so pretty much touching. The further out in front the weight goes, the more tension there will be in your low back to offset this. This option can also be done to a target. Another variation is placing a single dumbbell on your shoulder. You would just alternate the sides for the sets. The next progression is doing what's called a front rack position with the dumbbells. Your palms will face inwards while holding the dumbbells, and again, you want to keep the weights really close to your body, even though they're not really resting on your shoulders. In both variations, having the weight carried in front of you or on your shoulder allows you to keep your torso upright. When the weight is carried at your sides, this tends to draw your upper body down, so it can be harder to maintain an upright position. If you're at the gym, there's more advanced versions using a barbell, doing either back squats or front squats. Next up is hinging, also known as deadlifts. If you don't have very much experience with this movement, starting off with a broomstick works well to get used to the form. Run it along your thighs as you hinge at the hips. Ensure that your butt goes back as your upper body goes forward. Use the muscles on your backside to help to stand you back up, so your low back, your glutes, and your hamstrings. The next step is adding weight. You can use a single dumbbell, which often makes it easier to maintain proper form, or you can use 2 dumbbells. If you have a kettlebell, this makes it even easier to maintain proper form. If you're doing this at the gym, using a barbell is an option, which is how I do it. Deadlifts are one of my favorite movements, but I've had to slowly add weight back since radiation fibrosis side effects kicked in. Just like pull-ups, deadlifts also activate the lat muscles, so my shoulder can sometimes get aggravated. There are a number of variations of deadlifts that you can try. Romanian deadlifts are where you keep your legs a little bit more straight compared to a traditional deadlift, but not completely straight. You can do a split stance or kickstand deadlift where the majority of weight is in your front foot and you're doing the same hinging movement. For one leg movements, I'll cover lunges, split squats, and a lever. Since everyone has a stronger side, which often takes over with two-legged movements, these are great to ensure your weaker side is working. Lunges work similar muscles to squats. Starting with bodyweight lunges, these can either be forward lunges or reverse lunges, which is my preference. Another option is doing front foot elevated lunges, where your front foot stays on the elevated object and then you just go up and down. The next step is adding weights. The weights can either be at your side in a front rack position, near your shoulders, or you can use a single dumbbell and place it on one shoulder. A similar movement to lunges is a Bulgarian split squat, where your back leg is elevated. These can be pretty challenging doing them with your body weight only, as there's a balance component to this exercise. When you're ready to add weight, it's similar to lunges, where you can have the weight down by your sides in a front rack position or using one dumbbell and placing it on your shoulder. A lever is another name for a single leg deadlift. Holding a dumbbell, lower your torso down while your back leg raises. The dumbbell is held on the same side that your leg is raised. Sometimes this movement is done holding two dumbbells. You would usually use less weight with this variation because there's a focus on balance. Now that you know all the exercises, how do you put all of this together? You could pick one variation from each movement and do 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps per exercise. You don't need to do 2 to 3 sets of each exercise before moving on to the next exercise. It's more time efficient to do all the exercises in a row and repeat this for 2 to 3 sets. Since there are both upper and lower body movements, you could alternate these so you're not doing all of the upper body movements first and then all the lower body ones second. Let me know in the comments below if you give some of these exercises a try. Once I make a follow along strength training video, that'll be up next. Thanks for watching and keep active.